Hi, everybody. Guys, what topics, what questions do we want to discuss?
Jason, Lobell, and I, well, mostly Jason, have worked through some use cases so we could share what we learned. That could be a topic.
And Jason is quite new to SQL and FHIR, yeah? Maybe Jason can share the experience.
He's new in general. He's a student.
But it is interesting how easy it was to understand what is SQL and
Jason,
FHIR.
are you there?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I guess I was introduced, but just wanted to say a little bit more. I go to UVM, University of Vermont, studying complex systems and data science. I'm here for the summer as an intern. I have limited SQL experience. I've taken maybe 2 classes. I had no idea what FHIR was before about 6 weeks ago. So this has all kind of just been like blitzed and I'm enjoying it. Joined a couple other work group calls, try to get up to speed a little bit, been looking at some specifications. Yeah, I guess I'll just share my screen. We generated the test data with Synthea, which is pretty standard. We could have done Firebase, but I just wanted to do Synthea to test that out. There was like a weird thing happening when I was trying to load some of the data into Postgres. So I just made a little Z shell script to like clean up some fields, which is pretty straightforward. What Brian told me to look into was to split references based on resource type and ID. And so we have a little implementation of that going. The use case I decided to look into was just anemia. I just wanted to create 2 views and write a little join statement to get comfortable with the whole like technology. And so, and yeah, I wanted to work with like nested data as well, kind of get comfortable with that. So I have I did it both ways, but I'll look at Josh's first. So here is just the view definition for that. I guess I can just go in here and this is Josh's website. So just load in the data, generate that. And here it all is nicely formatted, standard. And so I just did 2 different view definitions. And so this one's just exactly the same with a different code and just hemoglobin and hematocrit. That's just what it was. And then so this is Nikolai syntax. And so this is what we were trying to implement right here. So I don't think there are string functions available for this implementation. So it's going to look a little different when I render it.
You can use for getting ID, you can use get ID camel case function to get ID, and we agreed to introduce this function, but probably we can discuss like get resource type as well.
Right. That's what it should look like. This is what it actually looks like. So yeah, I materialized both of the hematocrit and the hemoglobin, which is exactly the same. That's all standard. And then the ANSI query, we wanted to join on subject ID and filter by like the resource type specifically. But since there weren't string functions in Nikolai's implementation, we kind of scrapped that and just have like we just joined on patient specifically. And so I'm just in terms of like getting comfortable with the whole like protocol, I like it a lot more than trying to implement it in Postgres or like on some other SQL database, because it's just, yeah, it's way more straightforward. And I guess I can just show you guys what I did for the Postgres query as well. It's a lot more annoying to deal with like the nested data. We created a table with just like storing all the JSON objects and then created 2 views. So this is a lot more nasty to work with than the view definition. So it took me a little while to figure that out, but then the query itself is pretty similar. If you guys would like me to, I could like actually run the SQL itself, but you can just, this is all on GitHub, so you can take a look at this code as well. And yeah, DuckDB, I implemented it on there as well. The nested JSON like access is a little different, but it's basically the same syntax. Like the only difference is that Postgres has this like content parent that DuckDB doesn't have. Yeah, and the join statement is pretty much identical as well. And overall, it's like we want to filter by the resource type and join on the ID, which is kind of what Brian and I had worked on. I think that's everything. Sorry if it's a little confusing. Any questions?
How long time did you spend on it?
I'd spent a couple weeks kind of just getting used to working with FHIR, and then like, well, all right, so the first week was just like learning all of the like best practice ways to implement stuff, and then I probably spent a week writing this use case, more or less. So yeah, it was pretty straightforward though. I didn't really run into any massive
We also spent a few
obstacles.
minutes learning how to format Markdown.
Yeah, and you missed this function in FHIR, which we want to introduce, which is called get ID. The idea to abstract away the representation of reference in a database, because in case, for example, Firebase, so we're pre-parsing references. You should not do this manually.
The thing is, many times the reference is polymorphic, so we need the type too.
Probably we need the function for resource type as well. Yeah, so that's good finding.
It occurs to me that for this joining use case, we might even have an abstraction like get, I mean, I wouldn't call it this, but get join key, which is just something that you can use for joining. If that's all you want from it, like you don't really care whether it's the ID and the type or something else, like you just want it to act that way.
Can you elaborate?
I think that function would also you need to say that you'd have to specify the type. So get join key for patient or for group, right?
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, you can always filter by but you could not filter by resource type with a string. Yeah. Okay, so then we can like get ID and probably which can accept parameter resource type. Yeah, or something like this.
Yeah. And it could accept multiple resource types or something. I think that could be nice.
The get ID and passing a resource type is exactly what we did in our little prototype in Python. Just like, so yeah, so you can, have observation, like get ID patient, and so that worked fairly cleanly. So yeah, getting ID and specifying the type in some syntax, I think it would be super useful. And definitely we should include that. And yeah, we can maybe put together a GitHub issue and figure out what exact syntax we want to have for that.
Next, we're gonna try to work through, we talked about the date ranges, like a start and end date for all dates. And then we kind of fat fingered the quantity, but we wanted to address the units as well. And so I think we're gonna continue on this use case, but kind of elaborate on those things unless you all think there's something better. I think this use case is nice because we still have some more stuff to test out, I think.
That sounds valuable. Okay, thank you guys. Jason, welcome to the club. Do we have other topics to discuss? Ryan, how is your Python implementation?
Yeah, it's like there's been kind of a busy week in other areas, so don't have like a significant updates to report there. Other than the fact that there's some other folks' interest, so we're sort of picking up momentum, and I think this is going to be it's definitely happening, but unfortunately did not happen in any substantive way this week. So no news there, but hopefully that'll change in future weeks. And I know that there's like a few outstanding things that we wanted to refine in the spec, I guess. And there's always eventually we're gonna have to bite the bullet and work out our date time semantics without ambiguity and that sort of thing as well. But I don't have a concrete proposal for that today. And maybe we can make it a goal to come up with something that we can discuss as a group for next week.
Yeah, if Jason can prepare some use cases and Brian, so we can discuss. So at least we discussed that potentially it can be done on this view definition layer. Yes, so the user may decide would it be like range or just date or something like this.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, I can see use cases. Yeah, if we can get a start value and end value, I can definitely appreciate that use case, the views, and then also in cases where you just have where you're fairly confident that your data set has your birth dates are always full dates. Analytic users are going to expect actual first class dates, and so some way to do that, and with appropriate error handling for when you're wrong about that assumption, I think will be a key one as well.
As we were kind of going through this and I was getting hands on keyboard, I guess is the idea to kind of proliferate all these view definitions, or are we going to have like standard sets of them? Because there is a non-trivial work to implement a view definition. And I always thought that we were going to make like, there'd be kind of like stock ones that you could piece together with the layers or maybe that pattern will emerge at some point. But I was just wondering what everyone was thinking of that. Like, are we literally going to have tons of view definitions every time there's a use case, or is there going to be some reusability in kind of cataloging of these view definitions to make implementation a little easier?
Yeah, we believe that eventually we will have like catalog of views, and views will cover a lot, the family of use cases, not just one use case, yes, but the family, and probably some of views going to be reusable a lot. And that's, I think that if we split kind of view authoring and the view usage, so we may expect that some people will design views and others will use it.
Yeah, I agree as well. Yeah, I would love to see like a common set of views for common use cases. Maybe I think of it a little bit like maybe an implementation guide, except hopefully a heck of a lot easier to create than an implementation guide. And that there's some really common ones that are used a lot, and then there's some special cases that people create for their own needs. And so I think that there'll be some distribution like that. But yeah, and it'd be interesting even to the point of I wonder if we could explore like having for like certain implementation guides, like a set of predefined views that matches that implementation guide. So, the types of queries you typically do over like QI core or something like that, or, there's probably a set of views that would support most of those. And if we had like that and connected those to IGs, then maybe that'd be a great way to make that connection there.
Yeah, that sounds great.
And I envision, the view definition and probably like portable queries may kind of complement IGs. So people will be able to publish it with the views and some reports on top of it. And that's another interesting option. Yeah, that's why we should introduce this view resource. And probably after that, think about query resource or something like this.
It's kind of refreshing not to be debating really deep semantics for a specific subselect. So sometimes the lack of topics actually feels good in a way.
Yeah, I think we need to do more implementation before we have more where we find more issues in the spec. I think the only thing that's like maybe outstanding that's kind of a dumb issue but might be a blocker for people is we haven't come up with a common term for each outer joins, left outer joins. So I think even agreeing on something tentatively will let people kind of use that in their implementation, so we don't all just do something different. One that occurred to me was, and I don't know if this resonates. It's really because this is more aesthetics than technical. But one thing we could do is have like for each or null, or for each or empty or something like that for the to cover the use case where we want to keep rows even if there's no data there. I don't know, that was what occurred to me. I like the notion. I watched the video from last meeting and sounded like folks were more in favor of a separate kind of term rather than a parameter. And I like that because I think the parameters are always just adding more parameters kind of makes it harder to read. But I think we should tentatively agree on something, and we could vote on Zulip if folks have.
Yeah, maybe let's do the voting. Yes, and
do we have a list though of what we want to vote on?
I think we should kind of aggregate it from our discussions. If somebody ready to do this,
can go through and pull out a bunch of them, and people can let me know if I missed any.
What's the practical use case of this kind of join? Just so I didn't watch the last video, so
yeah, sorry, I jumped right in without providing any context. Apologize. So I think what we had said is, so we have this for each construct where it does an unnest basically, or an explode. All the databases have different terms for this still. So we have this for each construct, but for each construct, I think we were talking about making that a default inner join. or cross join in some databases for a nest. And so what that would do is it would mean if that sub element doesn't exist in the FHIR resource, then you don't get back the parent row either. And so the alternate join option we want to support is the option to keep the parent row and just show null for the child or for the nested field. And so we were looking for another term to other than for each to cover that. That makes sense, Brian? That was a little convoluted. Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
And as with everything, like naming is hard. So, but I think I don't care that much what it is, but I think having a common name before everybody does implementation would make sense.
Yeah, let's pick the name. Let's do the voting on Zulip. Yeah, and everybody welcome to participate.
For each or null. How's that?
Yeah, that's one option, for each and for each or null. So in terms of for each, it sounds like natural for JavaScript style thinking. Yes. So you say for each or null. Yeah. Or ChatGPT suggested like explode, expand, different words, and we can kind of pick the less frequently used word and put our semantic on it. So that's another option, like enroll for each or null, or unnest or expand or live join.
And that's even before we get into cases, camel case, lowercase, dashes, underscores, got all sorts of options.
Yeah.
That's a hard problem to name it.
Yeah, so something like for each or null sounds good to me. I like descriptive names. It tells you what it does, and at that point, it seems like we're lowercase isn't an option. There's too many words together, so we're probably in camel case at that point, unless somebody wants to make a case for like snake case or kebab case or something. But
yeah, I think so. The for use cases, for me, most interesting working group for like one of the interesting group is a cohort building. Yes. I don't know, maybe we can a little bit collaborate with some working groups and probably try to apply the view definition for cohort building or something like this, because I think the cohort building essentially cover most of queries. I can imagine all possible queries for cohorts, and this involves joins and other stuff, so that's very interesting example. Yeah.
Have we roughed out a logical model like in FHIR speak for the view definition yet?
So we postpone it unless we design it finally.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were focused on creating that sort of JSON-based structure, just something that we can kind of share and iterate on very quickly because so much was in flux. But now that other than the things like the for each name, I mean, I think the overall approach is fairly clear. So I mean, if there was interest and I mean, I think we're at a more stable point, and so if we wanted to explore that now, I think that would make sense. That's just having not something we've gotten to quite yet. And then I think that there's still like this sort of focus on working on some of these edge cases as well. But I wouldn't object to having a logical model to describe these. Certainly, it's just not something we've done.
It is a nice structure, so I like the way it turned out a lot. So good work, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, we discussed that we need some UX experiments. So the first one is successful. Now we need more engines, yes, and probably test cases, yes. So to test all implementation.
So just so that I understand as we go through this, are there any initial thoughts on unit conversion? Are these keywords that we're going to add, or how do we? Does anyone have any initial thoughts on unit conversion or unit normalization syntax?
Yeah, we discussed it potentially where for me it's kind of the similar to what we discussed during the type coercion. So we may introduce additional keys like type for each column. And there's the two options. We can build in this conversion into FHIR path, or make it as a separate like processor, so that you extract the value and then you apply some conversions. And that's I'm not, I don't know, is it in FHIR path, do we have something like normalization of units or not? Or we can introduce like function like normalize or something like this. But we need use cases to discuss it. Because what I know that sometimes the conversion depends on other attributes of resource. And that's more complicated, much more complicated than just value and unit, like number and unit conversion. Yeah, I bring this example with the moles and milligrams per liter, yes, for glucose, for example. This required to know that this is exactly glucose and put some formula with the molar mass of glucose. That's maybe a little bit more complicated than just UCOM conversion. Or essentially that can be done, as we discussed it, we have option to do this on a SQL layer after the view were defined. So
I see. So you wouldn't express this in the view definition? Is that what I'm hearing or understanding?
Yeah, we have several options. So if we will have use case, and we can discuss. I would like to have something like this in the view definition.
Yeah.
Probably without any magic, maybe people can provide a formula for conversion or something like this, not using implicit UCOM stuff, just put how it should be calculated. I don't know, Josh, I think you tried to implement UCOM stuff, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago, I put together just sort of basic JavaScript implementation of UCOM. I think you point out some of the key decision points that you have to make. UCOM has its own database of units that's very good for anything you can convert by simple multiplication. It gets harder when you deal with other kinds of scaling formulas. And then, as you say, it gets harder when you need some external knowledge, like we're talking about glucose molecules versus sodium molecules in order to do molar conversions. But I think those three categories together represent the complexity I know about in this space. And the first one is extremely straightforward. Like just UCOM has a database of everything you need, and it's just math. And the other two need function application or additional data. But it might be worth at least tackling that first piece.
Usually it's just arithmetic, yes, but
yes,
some external knowledge may be needed or maybe not.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, that would be nice to have example and discuss how we can, can we introduce some functions, or I don't know, provide additional formula in separate element, how to calculate. The only problem that this is not primitive type, yes, so sometimes so that we should treat like a value with unit. So it's hard to put it on a column.
Yeah, maybe a good exercise would be to write out as close as we can get to an example for glucose that generates a view that can start with observations of molar concentrations and weight concentrations. I can sketch that out and share something in Zulip as a starting point, and then we can see what parts of that we might want to optimize.
So the similar stuff potentially is related to time zones as well, yeah? Because sometimes time zones are important. Probably, yeah, for reports, yes, end of the day, like, and stuff like this, like encounters reporting. Otherwise, it may be kind of absurdic result if you don't take into account the time zones. Okay, so that's nice direction. Let's wait for use cases and discuss what we can do in our DSL.
So for next week, maybe we queue up discussions of some data, thinking about how we will work with dates, and also potentially some of the units, UCOM stuff, and then kind of any new use cases that folks have time to work on and I want to kind of present or discuss.
Yeah, good plan.
Sounds good. So, all right, yeah. So maybe if I can jot down some thoughts on the date stuff, maybe, and it sounded like Dan, you were going to collate the for each and nest options, and I think Josh was going to explore some unit conversion capabilities. And if are those our homework assignments? Yeah, sounds good. It'd be good to have that way I'll hold myself responsible for having something prepared for next week. But that'll work.
So if no other topics, okay. So yeah, see you guys in a week. So have a good day. Bye. Thank you.
Great weekend.
Bye.
Take care all.